Hey everybody, my name is Quinn the GM. Welcome back to the channel. Vecna has been a big topic on everybody's minds lately, particularly due to the new season of Stranger Things, which is very good. I'm nearly done with it myself, but I've really enjoyed it so far. And Wizards did something really cool in response to that. Back when they had the D&D Direct a few months ago, they released some Spelljammer monsters for free on D&D Beyond. Furthermore, when their acquisition of D&D Beyond became finalized, they essentially gave 2 books as free content, being the starter set and Acquisitions Incorporated. Now they've made another new monster and massive chunk of lore all about Vecna in 5th edition, which has not been something that was officially made beforehand. I'm excited to go through this. I'm going to read all the lore, the stat block, and give my thoughts on it. I'll give the link to the actual thing itself below. Be sure to check that out. You can claim it yourself if you have a D&D Beyond account. And yeah, let's dive into it. If you enjoy this, be sure to like and subscribe. I cover all kinds of new D&D stuff on the channel, and I really enjoy doing it. So yeah, thank you all for your support, and let's dive in. We're going to jump right into the lore now. There's a ton of it. I know a lot of people are complaining about not having enough monster lore in Monsters of the Multiverse, and this really addresses that, as there's a ton of lore here that can't even all fit on my computer screen at once. So let's jump in here. Vecna. On countless worlds, his name evokes tales of terror and cruelty. Vecna the Undying King. Vecna the Whispered One. Vecna, Lord of the Rotted Tower. Over more than 100,000 years, incandescent hatred carried him from the humblest of origins to a conqueror's throne, then to the realms that lie beyond life and death, and finally to godhood. Many have suffered his terrible wrath, but few can recount how a lowly scribe left an eon-deep scar on the multiverse, ascending beyond the material altogether. Only a few fragments of Vecna's story have ever been unearthed. It is said that Vecna was born into a lowly caste in the world of Oerth, a son of a hedge witch and a father he never knew. An order of wizards exiled Vecna's mother into the Waste for practicing the forbidden art of necromancy. The order bound her to orphan son into servitude, if I could speak today, and employed him first as a bootblack, then as a scribe. Vecna spent the better part of his childhood secretly educating himself in his master's arts, stealing from the library of magical treatises each night after midnight. It was during these intense study sessions that he first heard a soothing voice in his head, a whisper from another world that promised him revenge, if only he would yield to the hatred that was festering in his heart. Once Vecna learned all he could from the masters and their books, he massacred them. On that very night, a voice urged him to record his every foul thought and dream, and he started to pen his Book of Vile Darkness. It's a very famous magic item. According to legend, Vecna went on to forge a kingdom in the world of Greyhawk. He ruled for several centuries from an obsidian tower that rose from the bottom of the black waters of the Near-Dev to stretch far above its surface. During this era, at the urging of the voice, Vecna conquered the vast realms and kept great cities beneath earth and rock. Generations later, when his physical form finally started to succumb to the ravages of time, Vecna's festering hatred would not permit him to perish. He called upon the forbidden arts of necromancy to transform himself into a lich, a frightful being beyond the reach of death. At some point, Vecna grew bored with his kingdom of Oerth and started visiting his evil on other worlds, still driven by the mysterious voice and his unquenchable hatred for all things true and pure. For a time, he is said to have inhabited a place known as the Citadel of Cavitus, located in a vast field of ash somewhere between the elemental planes of earth and fire. Finally, a fallen paladin known as Cass the Bloody-Handed rose through the ranks of Vecna's vile minions to become the Artlich's personal guard and regent over many of the kingdoms and cults Vecna established across the multiverse. As a symbol of Cass's authority, Vecna forged him a terrifying weapon, now known as the Sword of Cass, which is also a very famous artifact. Later, Cass turned on Vecna and used the sword to sever the Archlich's hand and put out his eye. No one knows why Cass betrayed Vecna. Some believe the mysterious voice that spoke to Vecna for eons began to fear the Lich and began speaking to Cass instead. After their clash, Cass and Vecna disappeared for ages. The former later emerged as the ruler of a wasteland domain of Tovag in the Shadowfell. The latter spent several centuries hopping from world to world, questing for his severed hand and eye. More recently, Vecna decamped to the outer plane, and he grew so powerful that he became a god. He has many ardent worshippers, all hungry for a taste of his immense power. The accompanying stat block depicts Vecna in his Archlich's form prior to Cass's betrayal. Because Vecna is said to have mastered magic, allowing him to travel through time, he can appear in his form even in worlds where severed hand and eye are already known artifacts. Then there's also a section on the Book of Vile Darkness. While Vecna always carries the Book of Vile Darkness on his person, in fact, he fashioned his lich form to encompass the book, he typically has no need to call upon its foul magic in battle. If the DM wishes to run a more challenging and even more complex encounter, Vecna may call upon any of the book's abilities as appropriate. We are now going to go through the stat block, which is immense. He is CR 26. I love high CR creatures, and I'm really excited to see this and hopefully to run it in a game someday. We shall see. Vecna the Archlich. So this does very specifically say this is before he is a god. He's a medium undead. He's a wizard. He's lawful evil. His armor class is 18. This is natural armor. This is quite impressive for a wizard, but makes sense as he's a lich and more kind of has more fortitude than a typical wizard would. 272 hit points on the lower end for a challenge rating 26 creature, but definitely makes sense with him being a wizard and having a tiny hit dice. Though it is interesting that his hit dice here is a D8 instead of a D6. His speed is 30 feet. That could also be considered a weakness as he can't really move very fast. Strength of +2, Dex of +3, Con of +4, Intelligence of +6, Wisdom of +7, and Charisma of +3. Weird that Wisdom's is highest. My assumption was always that Intelligence would be the highest. Also, I think my thoughts are partially impacted by the critical role of Vecna that we saw at the end of, spoilers, one of the campaigns there. Saving throws, Con +12, great for concentration, Intelligence +14, Wisdom +15. He's got 4 skills, expertise in one of them being Arcana. He has resistance to cold, lightning, and necrotic damage. He has immunity to poison damage and bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. He has condition immunities to charmed, exhaustion, frightened, paralyzed, poisoned, and stunned. He has true sight for 120 feet and passive perception of 25. Languages are Common, Draconic, Elvish, and Infernal. And his proficiency bonus is +8. Wow, he is quite high level, if that's to be believed. 5 legendary resistance per day. That is actually exactly the same as he had in Critical Role. Special equipment. He also has a magic dagger called Afterthought in the hands of anyone other than Vecna. Afterthought is just a +2 dagger, but it has special properties when held by him. Undying. If Vecna is slain, his soul refuses to accept his fate, and it lives on as a disembodied spirit that fashions a new body for itself after 1d100 years. Vecna's soul can fashion a new body, even if its old body was burned to ash or otherwise obliterated. When the new body is complete, Vecna regains all his hit points and becomes active again. Vecna's new body appears anywhere within 100 miles of where Vecna was slain. So there's really no way to kill Vecna. That's really cool, and I love that flavor element that really puts him above and beyond the typical lich. You can tell this is an arch lich. This is somebody who is above the typical fare. Unusual nature, which is a standard lich trait. Vecna doesn't require air, food, drink, or sleep. I like that they've changed the phrasing on that a little bit in recent stat books, and I'm a fan of it. Multi-attack. Vecna uses Flight of the Damned if available, Rotten Fate, or Spellcasting. He then makes 2 attacks with Afterthought. It's great that he has a variation in his abilities. He has essentially one option you can do to start the turn and then make some dagger attacks, which is nice to have just as an option. So Afterthought is a melee weapon attack. It has a 5-foot reach, +13 to hit. On a hit, it's a d4 +5 piercing damage, and then 2d8 necrotic damage. If the target is a creature, it is inflicted with entropic magic, taking 2d8 necrotic damage at the start of each of its turns. Immediately after taking this damage on its turn, it can make a DC 20 Constitution saving throw, ending the effect on itself on a success. Until it succeeds the save, an afflicted target cannot regain hit points. Flight of the Damned, recharge 5/6. It's cool that he got a recharge ability, like a Dragon's Breath weapon, but slightly different in this case. Vecna conjures a torrent of flying spectral entities that fill a 120-foot cone and pass through all creatures in the area before dissipating. So it really is a kind of a... Wow, they gave Vecna a breath weapon, which is really, really cool. And the name is also just rad. So DC 22 con save. On a failed save, they take 8d8 necrotic damage and are frightened of Vecna for 1 minute. On a failed... I believe that is a typo in this. I assume it'll be fixed. This just came out today as I'm reading this. It says, on a failed save, the creature takes half as much. I assume it's on a successful save and isn't frightened. Frightened creature can repeat the save at each of its turns. Rotten Fate. Vecna causes the necrotic magic to engulf one creature he can see within 120 feet of himself. Must make a DC 22 Constitution save or take 96, 8d8 plus 60 necrotic damage on a failed save. That is a potential maximum of 120. 96 is just the average, and take half as much as a successful one. If a humanoid is killed by this magic, they rise as a zombie at the start of the Vecna's next turn, and act immediately after Vecna in the initiative order. Zombies under Vecna's control. No recharge on that. That's crazy. I love that. Spellcasting is also present. Vecna casts one of the following spells requiring no material components and using intelligence as his spellcasting ability. DC 22. At will, he can cast Animate Dead as an action, which is quite good. Detect Magic, Dispel Magic, Fly, which can help with speed problem, Lightning Bolt, Mage Hand, and Prestidigitation. He also has 2 per day of Dimension Door, Invisibility, and Scrying as an action. As an action, Scrying is great. And then 1 per day of Dominate Monster, Globe of Invulnerability, and Plane Shift. I feel like the spell list should be a little expanded, but I do get that this is something they're doing with more recent monsters, particularly having things that aren't just blocks of spells. Bonus action is Vile Teleport, which is a teleport that can go up to 30 feet, essentially a Misty Step, and it can cause creatures of his choice within 15 feet to take 3d6 psychic damage. Wow, if at least one creature takes its damage, Vecna regains 80 hit points. Wow, that is awesome. That creates some really interesting tactical positioning possibilities for your party in that you might not want anybody to get within 15 feet of him so he can't get off this 80 hit point healing. He's also got He's got 2 reaction options, but he can take up to 3 reactions per round, but only 1 per turn. So he can do an entire round of combat up to 3, but only 1 per each creature's turn. That's really cool and very much unprecedented in terms of anything we've seen in 5e before, other than like the Hydra. Dread Counterspell. So it's essentially a 4th level counterspell that he can make an intelligence check to stop any spell of 5th level or higher, which is really cool. And it also does damage to the caster, 3d6 psychic damage if the spell fails, which is awesome. I'd love to see Dread Counterspell seen as like a higher level actual spell version of Counterspell someday in order to have players be able to do that. He also has Fell Rebuke. In response to being hit by an attack, Vecna utters a foul word, dealing 10 3d6 necrotic damage to the attacker. And Vecna also teleports along with any equipment he's wearing or carrying up to 30 feet into an unoccupied space he can see. I absolutely love this stat block. Wizards have been knocking it out of the park on monster design lately, and I love that they're making this stuff just available for free on D&D Beyond, which is fantastic. It's great to have resources that are available to all DMs playing at any time, no matter what. I really think this allows for a very dynamic fight, like I said earlier, with the teleportation ability as a bonus action to like heal him, in addition to him having abilities focused on movement and on counterspelling and on just generally creating unique situations in which PCs can interact with them. Overall, I would love to run this in a game of my own someday. I honestly really want to now. We'll see. Players beware. But thank you all for joining me today. What do you think of this? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the new updated Vecna lore and stack block in 5th edition. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. I love making videos for the channel, and I'd love to do more of it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you all have a good day. See ya.